Bojo, hello, and welcome back to the Fashioning Resurgence panel series co-presented by Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto and the School of Fashion at Ryerson University. My name is Riley Kuchrin, and I'm an assistant professor of design leadership at the School of Fashion. Today, we are sitting down in conversation with Christy Belcourt. I'm so excited. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and Chimigwech to our incredible guest. I'm so excited to sit down with you. I do, however, wish we were either in person or sitting by a fire with a big cup of bush tea and catching up, but hopefully we'll be able to do some of that today. And so, yeah, hi, Christy, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing really well. It warmed up this week, which was kind of a blessing. So it was good to get some more winter prep in, but yeah, I'm doing good.
And we're joined today by Sage Paul. Hey, Sage, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. I'm really excited.
So I don't even know where to start. How have you been doing, Christy? How is NIMKI going? Are you still full steam ahead in the pandemic? Let's just give us an update. How is Christy Belcourt doing?
That's like three majorly huge questions. Yeah, I'm doing great. The camp Nimki Ajbekong is also doing really well. I mean, we shut everything down in terms of having sort of regular visitors come and go since COVID, but that's also given us a lot of time to be able to try and finish this language learning center and studio traditional art studio that we're building. So we're still fundraising for that, but it's full steam ahead on that. And we're still doing, like, of the core group that's sort of there year round, day in, day out. We're doing language and we're doing lots of traditional arts. I learned how to tan fish skins, which was like a dream and thrilling. And I'm not sure if COVID wasn't here, if I ever would have slowed down enough to be able to do that. So I'm like making earrings with the fish skin, the tan fish skin, and it's thrilling. It's thrilling to sort of like claim back some of these traditional arts practices that would have been used in our material cultures. So within our clothing, our accessories, and all those things. And to see people bringing those traditional items into contemporary designs has been like thrilling to watch. So I'm doing well. I'm busy doing all sorts of design stuff, which I really had a dream of doing for many years, like fabric and all sorts of things. And so that's what's going on.
That's so awesome. As an aside, I'll be working with Amber Sandy, and we're going to be doing a studio class this upcoming winter for fish skin tanning, because we originally wanted to do tanning and get out on the land, but all Ryerson courses are being conducted over Zoom right now. So we figured that fish skin tanning is something that everyone could do in their kitchen and just hold it up to the Zoom camera. So that's really, really cool that you've been doing fish skin tanning as well.
Yeah, Amber Sandy's videos, we've been watching them closely.
Right. So we might have jumped in there full steam ahead for sure, but for those who are not familiar, I'm sure many people know you of your work, nationally renowned artist. But I and a lot of Indigenous people know you more as an activist and as an environmentalist. So could you give us a little bit of insight to the work that you do at NIMKI, and what is that camp all about?
It's a language, it's a year-round land-based language and traditional cultural reclamation camp. So what that looks like, I guess, is that people do things seasonally. They do things according to what the weather dictates. And so that could be, we're less focused on workshops that are scheduled in a sort of, calendar mode, and more interested in the long-term reclamation process of becoming masters at things. So, you could go to a workshop and learn how to do quill baskets, for example. But if you just do that once and all of your materials are provided for you, you haven't really reclaimed that back within your sort of family line, So we're sort of looking at, if we do hide tanning, how many times a year can we do it, and can we do it in a way that where we become skilled and good at it, and young people are learning these things so that they can carry these foundational traditional arts, as Mila says all the time, to carry these foundational traditional arts forward.
That's really incredible. And I think it just goes to show you, like, even that word seasons and seasonality is so different in the context of fashion. Like, seasonality for Indigenous people are the seasons, the real seasons. And the fashion industry is this kind of manufactured notion of coming out with like a new look every single season. And I think it's so beautiful that you are just thinking about the real seasons out there. And I also really love what you said about working towards like a mastery of these techniques and how long that process is. We were speaking with Barbara Teller Onassis, who's a master Navajo weaver, and she's been doing that for 45 years to kind of gain that level of expertise with weaving. So I think it's beautiful how interconnected I guess this is. It's not a technique. It's part of Indigenous life, I think, right?
And I think also what I think of as well is the importance of reclaiming these things as much as we can, and how that naturally ties us into protection of the land and waters. Because when we're talking about moose hide tanning, which is a foundational traditional art, it's the foundation of our material culture in a lot of our nations, and we're looking at the moose populations, and we're looking at habitats of moose and how important it is to be protective of those habitats and that species. And then it naturally ties you into wanting to help, for example, the Algonquin people this year with their moose moratorium, to try and protect the moose populations from sports hunters. So we're looking at how our current design work based on traditional materials is also tied into land and water protection. If you don't have healthy fish, how are you going to tan fish skins? So passing these things down, including birch bark. The birch are not as big as they used to be. How do you make canoes and teach that to the next generation if you don't have the birch? So land and water is everything. it's everything. So it naturally ties you into that when you start to live on the land and live within the seasons and the rhythm of the land, and you're using every single part of the moose. Like a moose, one of our young people got his first moose. Every single part of that moose was used, and it was thrilling to watch. How he then distributed that among his community members and his elders, and how we then have the moose hide, and how we have the bones to make the tools with, and all of those things. And without healthy moose populations, how on earth would we be able to do that for the next generations? And with climate change, it's even more vitally important that we step in and start to step up and help people who are on the ground, on the front lines, taking on the brunt of industry and the militarized police forces in order to be able to protect the land and waters on behalf of all of us.
Me and Sage are just like sitting here like this, like
I'm like, oh. No, it's so true. And I'm just thinking about when you're like reclaiming these various practices, and we've doing these talks, like it's been really amazing to get to speak with everyone in this panel series, because that idea of reclamation, we're talking with people from nations from across Turtle Island, and I think about like birch bark and moose hide and how integral that is to our nations. Like my people are from northern Saskatchewan, and it's quite similar. I'd say poplar trees are more popular up there than birch trees, but that's still like just being aware of what you're taking from the land and how you return that, and making those decisions on like what you're practicing. Because when I think like I guess I'm just curious about like the camp is like how do you choose what's being taught there? I feel like there's so much to reclaim, but do you only base what's being taught on what is on like it being offered by the land, or is it like, hey, we really want to learn this kind of sheep weaving, this sheep wool something? Like what does that process look like?
I think it's a combination. So like somebody will come forward and say, hey, I really want to learn how to make clay, like do traditional pottery, which is something that I want to do. And I've done a couple times and I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. Like there's something that speaks to my spirit about working with actual clay and earth. And then there's a couple other young people that they had the opportunity to go to a nearby community and learn traditional pottery just in the past 2 weeks. And so they spent 2 weeks learning as well. So by next year, we're going to be building a kiln. We're going to be, because it's something that's traditional within this region. I live in Anishinaabe territory, but I'm not Anishinaabe. I'm Michif, and that my grandparents spoke Cree, and they're from Alberta, or my late grandparents were from Alberta. And I was never raised there. I was raised in Algonquin, Anishinaabe territory. And so, everything that we're doing here is based on Anishinaabe traditional knowledge and bringing back the things that the people here, particularly the young people, decide that they want to learn. So it's very much youth driven in terms of what is next up. And it also is within the scope of what's already practiced within this region. So for example, birch bark baskets, quill baskets, harvesting the birch, harvesting the quills, getting the sweetgrass, all these happen at a different time of the year. So in order to make birch bark baskets, just for example, you have to go when the things are ready. When the blueberries are ready to pick, they don't wait for you. You can't schedule it in, so you really have to make that decision. At some point, you get to the point when you're living on the land of having to break away from the traditional calendar and make that decision. Is this what I want for my life? And if it is, then the seasons begin to guide you on what is available regionally, what you do, and then how you can begin to reclaim the traditional arts practices that were in the region. So hide tanning, deer, moose, deer, fish, hide tanning, making the tools, all of those things come hand in hand with the seasonal practices that are on the land and available here. So that's basically what we're doing. In that sense, I'm a learner. Like I'm just here, like just learning every day. I learn something new because I want to reclaim these things for my family line. And they're not any different than what we practiced in, Lac St. Anne in Alberta. They're the same moose hide tanning and beadwork and quill work and, those types of things are all the same. So, yeah.
So what is your take on Indigenous fashion? Because I see how and working through this contributes to that reclamation and that resurgence and getting youth, so passionate about those skills and learning those skills and reclaiming those for their families. And then we have to translate that, or do we? Because then we come up against like consumption and the fashion industry, which is something else. So what's your take on that?
Well, the way I've been taught, so Sherry Farrell-Rosette, she's a prof out in Manitoba, but she's also a historian who's very well respected about her knowledge on traditional Métis material culture. So basically, clothing and accessories, historically speaking. And one thing she said that struck out to me about 15 years ago, she said, Métis people were always on the cutting edge of fashion. We were taking what we look at as historical, items. Now we're actually cutting edge fashion of the day. So when we look at the beadwork and we look at the things that people were making, the bandolier bags and the clothing designs and the things that we were doing with our beadwork and all of that was always fashion. And so, things went in and out of fashion too, the same way they do now, maybe not so fast, but they did. And so what I'm noticing is that designers now have incredible opportunities with technology to be able to make things on smaller scales. So we no longer have to go to big, huge, expensive and environmentally degrading kind of industries in order to create what we have dreamed of creating in our minds. We can do things on smaller scales. There's printing that's being made available now to designers to print their own fabrics, and which were not available on smaller scales before. So we're starting to see Indigenous fashion designers being able to do what they've always dreamed of, because technology is sort of catching up with our ability to be able to dream these things into reality. So I admire that, and I like that. And I think that there's always a way to figure out how to do this in a way that is respectful to the earth. So we have always done that traditionally. There's no reason why we can't figure out how to do it now. So for example, when we're sourcing materials, is sourcing organic cotton from overseas ethical? When we're talking about dyeing those materials in countries that might have their waters ruined by that. So the fact that we have organic cottons doesn't necessarily mean that it's ethical. Is it more ethical to source it locally, even though we're printing on materials that might not be fully biodegradable? So these are the questions as designers that we have to ask ourselves. What makes the most sense for us? Are we sourcing things locally? How can we do things in small batches? What kind of traditional materials can we use? Are we paying people fairly? And all those things. So I think that Indigenous art, Indigenous design fashion design is on the cutting edge. I always think that Indigenous artists are powerful and have amazing things to say. There's stories within our visual art, or within our clothing, or whatever it is that we're designing. And there's meaning there, deeper meaning, that I find very incredibly moving and spiritually powerful. And I don't see that there is these two worlds. I see that it's all really one, and that me as an artist, I can do whatever I want. I can be an activist. I can't fully an activist. I can fully be a designer. I can fully be an artist. I can be all of these things that I want to be. And so can everybody else. And I think that the old way of looking at things, where people were confined into boxes of either you are a visual artist who just works with galleries and somehow you taint your art by bringing it into a design, commercial fashion design world, or somehow you're not quite legitimately something because somebody deems that you aren't, because they want you to fit into this box. And I find that with Indigenous people, we are multi-talented, multi-faceted, complex beings that have these amazing, immense, the weight of the world is on our shoulders. We have the next generations that we're thinking about, what's going to be left for them. We have like our lands and waters we have to defend. We have like, there's a lot of prep. We have traumas and, like historical traumas we have to overcome. And then at the same time, we're creating these amazingly inspiring, powerful works of art, whether we wear them or whether we put them on the wall, that's what I'm seeing. So I'm thrilled by what I see in terms of Indigenous fashion right now.
I love that you bring up like the silos, essentially. And we are everything. Like you can be an activist, you can be an artist, you can be a designer. And it happens so often. I know, especially for people who do craft, it's a constant struggle between being an artisan, an artist, a craft person, a hobbyist, a designer. And it's like, you can be all of them. And it's just, I love that. And I guess speaking about that, can we speak about your Valentino collection? I think most people for our fashion audiences, I think they will most know you as for that project, actually.
What is it that you would like to know?
I think so. We also have a panel on collaborations, specifically collaborations between Indigenous artists, designers, and the fashion industry. It's kind of wild. I've been talking about this Valentino collaboration in my classes for like 4 years now. And I think it's changed a bit. Originally, I was kind of like saying, like, this is like the epitome. This is an example of a really, really strong ethical collaboration between fashion and an Indigenous person. And I'm wondering, is that still your opinion? Like, are you still really happy with how that collaboration played out? Are there ways that we could do collaborations better, perhaps, when we do kind of start to touch base with the mainstream industry or those big luxury brands that might start increasingly looking to Indigenous designers to collaborate? That's where my mind is thinking is how do we ensure those collaborations are equitable, sustainable, reciprocal for our young Indigenous designers who are coming up and hoping to be the next Valentino by, their brand.
I think what was good about the collaboration was that I felt respected throughout. I felt like my opinion was valued and was listened to. I mean, but this is Valentino; they know what they're doing, So it's not like I needed to go, no, this is what I want and that's what I want, Like it's like they came with their designs based on my art, and then I met with their fabric designer in Toronto, and we went over the fabrics, and there was some tweaks and some things that I needed changed in terms of the fabrics. He showed me the designs, and there wasn't a whole lot that I would ever dream of wanting to change in that collection. There was some just stunning pieces. I couldn't imagine my artwork being used any more beautifully than that. And the thing is that my art comes from a tradition of fashion, so it comes from a tradition of clothing, and so it's just been transferred to canvas, and now it was just transferred back to clothing. So, and it was done in such a tasteful, beautiful way. And I had conversations with them about the designs, about the fabric, about as it was going forward, it was going back and forth a bit, and it was a great relationship. And I did. At the beginning, I asked those questions that are important to me, like, have you ever been accused of appropriation? What is your stance on environment, on the environment? And every answer that they came back to me with was more than acceptable. It was a good answer, and it was something that I felt very comfortable with. So it was a relationship that was brief. It wasn't long. It was pretty fast. And they knew what they wanted, and there's nothing I would disagree with them on. And so it was good. And then afterwards, and then in terms of the deal, I guess, because you're talking about young people wanting to know what kind of things to expect. So, I mean, don't be afraid to ask for what you think is fair. For me, I didn't actually make any money off of it. So might be surprising to some people. And the reason why I didn't is because I chose to donate my money to Nimkiajibikong instead. So I didn't myself make an income off of it, but our camp benefited. And that was amazing, because my whole thing is to try and, I really do want to see our languages spoken as first languages again, and that's important to me. And so it was important to me to donate that money to the camp. So that was the deal that we arranged, and I think that that was satisfactory to me, and I felt good about it, and I still feel good about it. What I thought was terrible afterwards was that they were accused of appropriating in the very next line following mine. So clearly the discussions that we had about appropriation didn't sink in enough in the business for them to understand what appropriation is and why it's not acceptable to be ripping off of Native people. And I was very disappointed in that, because I had thought, oh, this company is different than the rest. And they proved that, there was clearly that message had not reached them well enough to permeate their business. The other thing that I was very disappointed in, and it wasn't anything to do with Valentino's fault, it was the knockoffs. So, because it's the House of Valentino, of course, naturally, there was an amazing amount of knockoff companies overseas, and that began to just bastardize the designs steal the artwork. I was playing whack-a-mole with them. I was on, I was trying to report them, saying it was stolen work. They no sooner would take one site down and another site would come up, and people were sending me messages all over the place saying, I think this is your design. And, and they not only took the Valentino designs, but then they altered them and they looked like shit and they were tacky and cheap. And, they had just basically ripped off my whole art. And at one point, I just said, you know what, hands up, I'm done. I'm just not going to spend my energy trying to track all this down and stop it. It's like a water leaking out of a bag with a bunch of holes. Like there's nothing you could do at that point. So I just had to just accept that they had ripped off my work, and I don't know where it went and how far it's gone. But fashion only lasts for a few seasons. And so I kind of also knew that like it wasn't going to last forever. I mean, it would go out of fashion. So that was, that's what happened with Valentino. It was a good experience. I would say be aware that your work could get ripped off by knockoff companies, and there's basically nothing you could do about it. You could spend all of your energy trying to sue them and stop it and all that stuff, but really life is too short for that kind of thing. So go into it with an open eyes about what could happen. Understand that these companies are very much, European-based companies who have no real understanding of Indigenous people, and there's going to be a very steep learning curve for them, and there's a chance that your work and you will be disrespected. And I am way more interested in, I think, collaborating with other Indigenous people, other Indigenous designers, and trying to do things like I was saying before. Technology has made it available now that we don't actually need to do things with big fashion houses. We can do incredible work and powerful work on our own and in collaboration with each other. And technology is making it so that we don't need to have these big productions and all of that. I mean, go for it if you want to go for it. Like, I have nothing but good things to say about my experience with them. It was the after things that were kind of not great.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, I have so many questions. I have more questions. It's so interesting because I did see so many of those knockoffs after the collection came out. And I was like, oh my God, it's like on one side, it was really cool to kind of see that happening within our community that was based on like a mainstream collection and rather than something that was based off of our culture specifically. But I also would think like in a position like that, you're working with Valentino, who has the power behind them to actually try to shut down those copycats. And like I find that so interesting because so many of our designers, Indigenous designers, I hate saying our designers, but so many Indigenous designers will end up doing a collaboration on not the scale as Valentino, but they'll do something with another company or they'll release something and then it gets ripped off. But they don't have that power to try to take their work back. And for some of them, this is like a question of like, their livelihood of being able to eat, especially if people are taking money from them. So it's like, I'm just wondering, like, did Valentino to make any effort to try to stop that? Or like to try to protect your work specifically? What did that look like?
So I messaged them and I said, hey, this is happening. And I'm sure that they were fully aware because, they have teams of people who do that. And what I was told was that it would be forwarded to the legal department. And that was the last I heard from it. So I imagine that they also choose to spend their time and energy in other ways, and that it wasn't as important to them as it was to me, perhaps, that the pieces were being ripped off. So there was no follow-up from them to me to say, yeah, we did this and we're trying and anything like that. And that was pretty much the last correspondence that I had with them.
I can imagine that they were also, fully aware of what you just said, is that it's trend-based and seasonal. So probably in their minds, it's going to go away in 6 months. So to even devote the legal resources, which they do have those legal resources, but I figured they might just not. So many things I just want to mention from your talk about the collaboration. I loved what you were kind of hinting at, is that we don't need to necessarily uphold a collaboration with a luxury fashion house as a measure of success for young Indigenous designers. Yes, you could, pursue that route, but even kind of like a better approach might just be collaborating with other Indigenous entrepreneurs, designers, and I know you have a couple collaborations in the works and have done some collaborations since Valentino. And yeah, I think it's also, I really appreciated what you said about just being fully aware of what you're getting yourself into. Like, you're going to be talking with Europeans who know nothing about our culture, know nothing about our values of respect and reciprocity. So don't go in thinking they will be, super as respectful as you would hope, because they're not, and they don't have those histories. They don't have those cultural, touch points with us. And also, I think you were hinting that the relationships need to be longer. Like, from start to finish, this was a tiny little collaboration, like a blink in terms of how many collections they have a year. So maybe is part of the answer also just slowing down and taking time to build a relationship before you even start thinking about what is like the product, what is the collaboration.
Yeah, I agree, and you said everything there. So you stated it so well, and better than I think I did. So thank you for that. One thing that I did want to say is that they did offer to fly me to Italy, to go there and to Milan and to sit with them and do the things over there. And I suppose if I had have done that, it would have been more. I don't know. It would have made me feel like I had more of an input at the beginning stages rather than just sort of at the middle stages. But at the same time, I was really super busy anyway, like I always am, and I didn't really want to, I was happy that they were like taking first cracks at things. So it was like, made me feel good. Like I was fine with the whole process. I decided instead that it would be a better use of the money to fly me to, rather than fly me all the way over there, that they use the money to donate it to the camp instead. I just couldn't imagine spending that kind of money just for me to go over there to have the pleasure of being there and working with them on their own, in their own house, so to speak. But so it was a decision that I made, which I kind of wish that I did have gone over there. Would have been able to give more of an insight, I suppose, to like in with you and with everybody else, as to what that kind of relationship would look like if you did get a chance to sort of physically be in the rooms designing with them from the sort of get-go and spend some good quality time there. Like you said, develop a more of a solid relationship rather than just a very short little one. So that's sort of a regret that I have, but I don't really have that regret because at the same time, I don't know, maybe that thing built our outhouse or something. I don't know.
Right.
Essential buildings at the camp,
Right.
Which lasts much longer than
a trip to Milan.
Everybody doesn't understand the importance of like outhouses when you're
Yeah. I'm also wondering about the narrative. Did you have a say in how it was represented? Because Indigenous fashion is so much more than the aesthetics and the look of it. It's so much like your paintings. It's not a painting. It's like a world of knowledge in that painting. Did you have some says in how it was represented, and like, did they speak to the significance of your art in like the marketing of the collection?
Yeah, I did have a chance to say, like, I told them what that painting was about, and I had presented that as an option for their, because our first conversations were like, well, we'd love to collaborate with you on a line. What kind of artwork do you think that you would have that would suit this? And immediately I thought of that painting because it would allow me to be able to speak to the water and the importance and the sacredness of water and how we are facing, such a crisis over water all around the globe. And so it was a very good talking, like a sort of a foundational point to launch off on that conversation. And I think that, that's one thing that a lot of Indigenous I guess artists and designers are doing is sort of doubling down on what is the meaning of these works, what is the importance here, and how does my work benefit the advocacy of speaking to these issues that are important to us and our people in our communities. So that was a choice that was made, and they were very happy with that choice. And we did have discussions about it. I had discussions with them about the residential schools and what had happened here and why languages were at the crisis point that they were, and why I didn't want to fly to Italy, and why I wanted that money donated to the camp. And it was the first time hearing about these things for them. So you can imagine it's a lot to absorb in a first kind of conversation. And but they were moved and wanted to help. So, you know, it was good.
And you've since gone on to collaborate with a few other brands. I think the next one might have been Ella Handbags and the Holt Renfrew project. But yeah, I think in our pre-conversation, you were talking about, you know, your love of fashion design, and you might kind of see yourself as a designer. What else have you been up to in terms of collaborations?
Yeah, I did the Ella handbags with the Holt Renfrew. And again, a portion of that went to the camp. So, you know, that was really beneficial that way. And I recently did the Catherine LeBond collection. So both of her and I did, like, we coordinated on designing. We went back and forth. It has been a long relationship. And so I'm wearing one of the pieces. I wanted to.
Who are you wearing?
Yeah, I'm wearing it. I wanted to create clothing that I felt could go from, you know, where you're out to dinner somewhere, or you know, dressed up, or like the other day I was in my kitchen and somebody brought over some deer meat that had to be cut up, and like I was like helping to butcher a deer, and then I'm like, oh, I'm wearing this dress. Super comfortable. So I wanted things that would like be comfortable, movable, you know, a little bit dressy, a little bit casual. So we worked on this collection, and I'm very, very pleased with it. And I actually really love it. I've tried on all the pieces, and they're very good pieces for my body, you know. And the thing is that I'm 54, and I'm not, you know, I'm probably on the plus side. So I'm not a skinny mini, and I'm not, you know, I just don't have the body of a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old anymore. And so I need clothing that's going to be beautiful, make me flattering, make me feel beautiful. And that's what I wanted to do, was create clothing that would be good for everybody. And so that's what we did. And then also the Cheekbone Beauty. So Jen Harper of Cheekbone Beauty and I worked on the packaging for her latest Sustain collection. And that collection, what I really like about Jen's company is that her, like, everything is recyclable. So even her lipstick containers, you break them down, they can recycle them. Her cards come with seeds embedded into them that you can plant. Everything is vegan and not tested on animals, and she pours them right there. Like, she's doing all of the production here locally, which is environmentally sound way of doing things. And I really like her, all of her efforts are always giving back to the community. She's always thinking about how she can help. And again, you know, our agreement is that there's a $5 from each set goes to the camp for language, specific for language revitalization efforts. So there's all of these things to be able to, you know, you can work in a way that benefits your people. And I think that that's a really important thing. You don't have to. Nobody's twisting your arm telling you have to. But, you know, I really believe in raising us all up. You know, I really believe in being excited for one another, in you know, showcasing one another's strengths and designs and gifts. And it makes me so excited to see what people are doing nowadays, from accessories to fashion to, you know, everything that they're involved in. And then there's another collaboration that I just did, which was Manitoba Mukluks. So this is the second year that we've been able to put together some mukluks, and I based this design off of old Métis embroidery patterns. So it's not exact, like it's not a ripoff of anybody's work, but it's based on the color palette, which is like the silk embroidery of pinks and purples and greens. And I don't know, there was just something about the color palette that really got me this time. So these mukluks I'm really pleased with. I'm really happy with. And there's some other things that I'm working on too. So which I can't tell you about yet because they're not out. So there's things that I'm working on, fabric design as well. So I'll have fabric up on Spoonflower available for people to, ship to themselves in small batches and sew with. And yeah, I'm thrilled with like all the things that I've been doing lately.
Wow. You've worked with a lot of people, a lot of different, like at a community level, at a grassroots level, right up to Valentino. And I'm kind of curious to know what those differences are, specifically like working within our community compared to working with someone like Valentino. Or do you just kind of, because it's your work being represented in so many different ways, whether it's with mukluks or on purses, Valentino, lipstick, and the fabric, like there's so many ways for your work to be shared and for us to learn more. And it's like, what, yeah, like what maybe like kind of, is there a type of collaboration that you prefer to see your work being represented in?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not looking at the big picture, like I'm looking at what is fun. what is fun to do, and what have I always wanted to do and maybe not been able to do because I lack those skills and somebody else has them. And I always look at people, I really do look at people as being equal in every respect. And so whether I'm dealing with somebody on the other end of the phone who's, making bank, with their job because they work at Valentino, or somebody who, is just like hustling their earrings, because they're trying to feed their kids. I don't care what, about that. What I care about is, can we do something that's fun? And are we going to both enjoy it? And is it going to be providing something where there's something missing? So for example, in fabric design, so all of those fabrics that as native fabrics, for example, I've been finding out that most of them are coming from one designer based in the United States who is a white woman. And it's coming from a person, the distributor, mainly who's getting them printed, is a guy based in Vancouver who has a relationship with this woman in Midwestern United States. And he's been telling her what his vision is of native fabric. She's been fulfilling the designs for him. He gets them sourced overseas and shipped to all of the fabric lands and all of the places that we see. That's why that beadwork fabric that we see looks off a bit. It doesn't look right. It's not our stuff. And you can tell, when you're a beadwork designer, or, you've worked with that stuff, you look at it, you're like, there's something off about this that doesn't quite look right. And when you really look at it, you're like, a beadworker would never make this mistake in this design. So that's when I was like, this is not designed by an Indigenous person. And then you look at some of the other typical designs. I mean, there's like horses mixed with geometrics, mixed with, all those typical fabrics that we've seen for so long in our fabric stores, which fulfill a need in our communities, because we have eagle feather cases to make, and we have ribbon skirts to make, and we have all these things that we want to make, regalia. And so it fills a need, but unfortunately it's not being sourced or supplied by Indigenous artists. And now technology has made it so that we are able to fulfill our own fabric needs. And that thrills me, the idea that anybody who wants to can create fabric and pop it up on Spoonflower and make it widely available to our communities, to our people. We know what we like, we know what we need, and And I find that within Indigenous, I guess, communities, whether you're designing for regalia or whether you're designing in terms of fashion, there's kind of a vibe that we understand each other. So when I'm working with Indigenous people that I'm collaborating with, I would say that the relationship is just a little bit easier. But that said, it's not always true, you know? And so it just, I guess, just on the human level, just connecting with people and making the project fun is the number one thing. If it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. Because as my mom would say, I'm looking at the shorter end of the stick right now. At the age of 54, I'm not looking at the long end anymore, you know? So I'm going to pick and choose the things that I think are important to me, that I think are fun, and that are worth my time. And I would say that if I had followed that motto all the way through from when I was younger, I probably would be better off right now, you know, mentally and emotionally. So I would just say, you know, follow your heart, do what's fun, do what's enjoyable. And once it stops being enjoyable, stop doing it. You know, this is your life. You get to choose what you want to do. And don't let anybody put you in a box. Don't let anybody decide for you what you can and can't do, or where you're supposed to fit or not fit. You know, the sky's the limit.
Wow. I was, so I'm taking notes. I definitely honed in on when you were talking about, so we're backtracking a little bit. You mentioned the importance of like body inclusivity when you were working with Catherine LeBlond. I think that's so key as well, because I imagine, I don't know what the size run of Valentino was, but I imagine it was not a very diverse size run. And so, you know, do the clothes even fit us? And so I think focusing on the full spectrum of body, age, diversity is so important. I loved, you know, when you were speaking about how you appreciate Jen Harper and her mission of uplifting and supporting community members. That is just such an Indigenous value for me, in stark contrast to a fashion system, a fashion industry that is like predicated on individualism and the notion of like, you know, just be an entrepreneur and, you know, just do it yourself. And it's very much like everyone is in it for themselves, and they just want to be a star designer, and the individual is so important in that fashion industry. But for us, it is about collaboration. And finally, I think like fashion sovereignty, if we can kind of think about a truly Indigenous fashion that is ours and that we're in control of, it would include production. It would include the supply chain. It would include us printing our own fabrics. Or I'm also reminded of, the name escapes me, but there's an Indigenous owned company that it has been producing the jingles on jingle dresses. It's like, we can't rely on someone else's manufactured buttons and someone else's fabric. So to take control over the supply chain, what I'm hearing is that's also incredibly important for our young designers. You were also touching on, I think you were hitting at one of my last questions was, what advice would you have for the two of us? We have a young Indigenous fashion professor, myself, and we have a young Indigenous artistic director of a fashion week. What advice do you have for us as we continue in this movement?
I don't know. I think you have more advice for me than I have for you. You know, I think the benefit of being older is that you've made enough mistakes to be smarter. So I always tell people, learn from my mistakes, you know, because I've made some doozies, you know, so, you know, just follow your heart. You know, that's all I can tell you. You know, your spirit, you are a spirit here living a human experience, you know, so you and you alone are here to fulfill your own spiritual journey and your own purpose. You know, follow your heart, and you can't go wrong. You'll make mistakes, everybody does, and it'll be heartbreaking. You'll have heartbreaks, you know, but mostly, you know, don't forget the joy. Don't work yourself to the point where you know you wake up 54 and you realize, shit, I forgot how to be joyful. I've worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. You know, I have worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week for the past 15 years, you know, and And it's only now that I'm beginning to sort of say, hey, slow down. Like, slow down. Have these moments of joy. Go visit your family, for God's sakes. Take some time for yourself. And there's no shame in that. You can get a lot done in a day, as one of these, the late elder George McDermott told me. He said, if you wake up early and you turn off the phone, and you turn off the TV, he said, you can get a lot done in a day. And he's right. And the only thing that I would say is make sure you add your family to that. Whatever family that is, whether it's your biological family or your spirit family, make time for them. It's important. There's no going back. You can't reclaim time. Your life is finite. You only have a certain amount. So make time for the people in your life. That's all.
That's all. I'm so happy to hear that, because it really resonates. You're like, I've worked 14-hour days, and that's what I feel like I do sometimes. And it's so easy because, of course, like I want to work hard and to try to, be successful within my own, whatever my own version of success is, and which is really not that much, but I still end up working a lot. And I think a lot of young designers do, we are always seeing an industry and people working in a way, and we see things online and they appear to have happened because of extremely hard work or extreme wealth, that there's all these things that make it seem as though that's why these things have happened. But I think it's really grounding to be reminded that you need to slow down and you need to be re-energized and be with family and enjoy the work that you're doing. I don't want to wake up and have rushed through it all to try to do everything and not remember any of it. Go back on my Facebook to be like, oh yeah, I did that. Thank you so much for reminding us of that. We're getting close to our time, but I was just wondering if there's any final things that you wanted to share with us, any upcoming projects or any new work, anything like that?
No, I don't. I mean, there's some things that I have that are coming out, like the small little things that I'm working on, and with others, and that are exciting to me. And I don't know what the next year holds. I mean, we're looking at societies that are deeply divided. We still have to eradicate white supremacy. That's huge to do. We've got to save the planet. There's some pretty big things coming up that we all have to participate in. But just encourage everybody to do what they can in that regard. There's always some people on the front lines that are taking the brunt and putting their bodies at risk for being on the front lines of land and water defense, and to find ways in which you can support them if they do fundraisers, pitch in, just whatever we can do. And hopefully 2021 will be a lot better than 2020. And we won't see we'll see a sort of a control of the coronavirus. That's what I'm really hoping for and praying for, so that people can go on and start to live their lives and see their families again.
I think a common thread I've observed through all of these collaborations you've spoken about is like your ethical compass, and how every collaboration supports the resurgence work that you are doing in that camp. And I think that is probably something that young Indigenous designers should be focusing on, is like the why, rather than how do I make this or what does it look like? Focusing on that why and honing in on what likely is like your family and your land and your traditions. That encompasses the why that you do that. So yeah, I'm so grateful that we've had a chance to sit down with you, and thank you so much for laying it all out there about Valentino. I think that's so important, because I think that's everyone in the Indigenous fashion community that's like, we all look up to that as such a shining example. So thank you for being very forthcoming about that collaboration as well. Yeah, Chimigwech.
Yeah, Masicho. So great to chat today, Christy.
Yeah, hi. It was really nice to speak with you both. I appreciate this very much, and I hope to see you both in person at some point. Yeah.
Me too.